too long
a year ago,
A year
yeah.
ago, yeah.
No one knew what the third ward was.
Or like the boundaries.
The boundaries.
Isn't that
yeah,
something?
yeah.
Right.
It's not all of the southeast side. There's a lot of people with southeast side addresses that don't live in the third ward.
I know. Wealthy, 44th, East Paris, Jefferson, and
Right.
a couple carve outs for East Grand Rapids and Garfield Park, but that's our core.
And then the other thing I think that kind of struck me as I was running was people just have this assumption southeast side they think predominantly black.
I know it's more white people in the third ward
Right.
than there are black people.
But at the same
everybody believes it's only black people. I don't even understand that.
Yeah, I think it's just a stigma, you know. And I think during my campaign I called it the United Nations of
Right.
of the city because it is the most diverse ward. So
It
it's
is.
33% African American, in the high 40% white. It's about 8% Latino, and
Mm-hmm.
it's the only ward that the Asian population shows up actually as a percentage. So,
Right.
so that's why I think it's so important that you and I serve because I think we've worked together before.
Mm-hmm.
I understand my role as a white male in leadership. That at times I need to be your cheerleader,
Yeah.
and at times I need to carry the torch. If there's an issue of race, I need to call that out because you can't because you're going to be accused of race baiting or something like
Yeah,
that.
or just
So
simply tired
yeah,
of calling it out. Like
Yeah.
we've been doing this for way too long, far too long, and not getting any results. So
Mhm.
let someone else carry the torch.
the Forbes report was kind of the big. I mean, it wasn't. It was just the
Well-
big. Okay, yeah, Grand Rapids may be the best city for this, the best city, but for African
these
Americans,
people,
not so
Not
much.
so much. To be honest, it was an eye opener for a lot of people.
Mhm.
However, it was confirmation for others.
Oh,
and
yes.
it's so interesting that a lot of people were thinking everything was okay and it wasn't this bad, and
Mhm.
people were offended by it.
Oh, yeah.
People felt like they needed to respond to it. But this is the reality. This is the reality of the people who, especially people of color who live in the community
Mhm.
right here in Grand Rapids or even Greater Grand Rapids. We've been experiencing economic decline for quite a long time. And it
Mhm.
actually is one of those issues that if we do not address this issue now,
Hmm.
this city and all of everything, all of its glory, everything that's behind us, all of the boom that's happening,
Hmm.
it can fail if we do not address this issue.
Well, I mean, studies show over and over and over there's not a major metropolitan area that has this level of disparity that can continue
That thrive.
that can thrive or keep
You
that
can't.
forward. So
You can't.
it drags down everything. And I guess a little bit of a frustration for me as I come in as a city leader is like, what can we do to change that? I mean,
Right.
I'm not an employer.
Right.
I can't pay people more money.
Right.
I can't be intentional about my hiring. So I think what I've kind of adopted, I don't know if you agree with this or not, let's control what we can control.
Mm-hmm.
So like the report that came from our own city diversity office about whites being promoted at a much higher rate than African Americans and
No
Latinos,
surprise.
white men being promoted. I mean, and when I got called by the press,
And we're not hiring.
and we're not hiring,
Right.
And-
People of color.
exactly. And so and we hear all the excuses, but
we can't find all of those things.
yeah, you have to take the civil service test,
Right.
Right. Let's remove those
Why,
barriers.
why don't we reevaluate the tools that we're using
Exactly.
if it's displacing or it's not allowing us to get into this organization who we say we
Right.
want. And I think part of it is we have to put our money where our mouth is. And
Absolutely.
I think
You
the
say that
city
all the
needs-
time.
I do, and
I
the
agree
city
with
needs
you.
to do that first.
Mhm.
Because if we set the stage and be the example that we want other
Mhm.
employers to follow, then we'll see the results that we're trying to see.
Well, let's assume that our staff people are not racially biased, and I don't feel that they are. We've got to change the system.
We have
We've
to
got
blow it up.
We have to blow it up.
We do have consultants looking at this and planning to make recommendations, and I don't think we're going to have recommendations that are unique,
No.
that we haven't heard already.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see if they're more accepted because they're coming from a professional.
Yeah, it is important to have that, the
Mhm.
proof's in the pudding kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it's going to cause us as a city to make some major changes.
Mhm.
If there's one thing currently in my experience as a city commissioner that's keeping me up at night is the housing crisis.
Yeah.
We're being touted all over the nation as one of the
Yeah.
hottest housing markets, the number one place to invest in. The fact remains that we have a housing crisis of historic proportions. The average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in this city is $800 a month. So in order for that to be affordable, you shouldn't have to pay more than 30% of your monthly income.
That's right.
So you need to make about $29,000 a year to afford $800 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the median income for African American families in this city is $26,000, and the median income for Latino families is about $27,000 a year. That means half the African American families and half the Latino families in this city can't afford to live in this city.
So when people are coming to city commission meetings, speaking during public comment, making points about, I was displaced from my home.
Right.
I can't afford to live where I was just living. My rent is going up, $200 a month. I don't make enough money. I'm working several part-time jobs to try and get enough
Right.
money. I can't find housing.
Mhm.
They won't rent to me. So this is the reality for people.
Right.
And this is why this reality exists,
Mhm.
what you just described.
But, you could say, okay, let's create more affordable housing, but that's expensive and a long-term proposition. But you can also say, well, people need to earn more. So one of the things that I've been proposing, and I think you're in agreement with me on this, is that every time we approve one of these brownfield tax credits, which are money to help support developing these tough to develop properties, they have to give us what the income ranges are going to be for the jobs that are created there.
Right.
I want to establish a policy in the city, and I'm working hard to do that salary can be no less than $15 an hour, which puts you almost at $30,000 a year.
In order to receive this
In order to
tax
receive this
credit.
tax credit.
Okay.
I think it's silly for us to invest millions of dollars into a development where they're paying people minimum wage.
Yeah.
We're just perpetuating the problem.
As a city, by giving this tax
That's
credit.
correct. And we have a legal right to do that.
Sure. How do we make sure that the people who are underpaid,
Yes.
how do we make sure that they're in those jobs?
Mhm.
Now, you're the expert. Go ahead. With this whole, because I think this is all part of the same game, because again, we can put all these measures in place, and if
Right.
we're still not making the impact, Forbes can come right back around in
Right.
5 years from now, talk about us being in the same boat.
Well, I think as city leaders, and particularly our mayor, who's very passionate about this, we do have the bully pulpit. And so, that's the best we can do. We can't force businesses to pay a certain amount. But, education, continually pointing out the problem, continuing pulling data that points out the problem. We need to invest in agencies and organizations that are helping prepare people to get those jobs.
Right. Because sometimes all it takes is, some technical skill.
Exactly.
That doesn't take a long time to get the skill,
Exactly.
and then you can, graduate into some program. Banning the box.
Yes.
Do you think having something that addresses banning the box so that people can get in the door, have conversations before people are making decisions about criminal history?
Right.
Do you think that would be valuable to trying to address this issue that we're talking about? Because people are just tired, and these are some of the obstacles.
No. I
and
think
we're not
not
addressing
valuable.
it.
I think it's important.
Okay.
I think it's important. I think there's still this potential legal battle over whether a city can require that or not. But you know what? Now that I mentioned that, there's a whole bunch of things that I've been told since the 6 months that I'm in, well, we can't do that because it's illegal. Well, you know what? At some point, when a situation's so bad, and when you look at the economic disparities, the housing disparities that we deal with in the city, sometimes I'm willing to fight that fight.
Yeah,
You
some
know?
things are worth the battle.
They're worth the
because
battle.
it may ultimately result in public policy change at
Absolutely.
the state level.
Absolutely. That gives me a lot of hope.
Well, you give me hope. I'm glad.
So different cultural groups have different sources of authority, right? And so if you think about cultural groups where oral tradition is going to be most paramount for their community, so the person who can tell the good story, the story that's passed along from generation to generation. And all people groups really have an oral tradition embedded in it. But the more and more Western and modern we become, those in positions of power tend to move away from oral tradition, which tends to invalidate the voices of people who still find dignity and identity in oral tradition. When people who represent disadvantaged or marginalized groups tell their story, and then they hear the response of, well, where are the facts? Where's the data? Sometimes the attempt to get data is a way to make illegitimate the voices of the people in those groups, so it delays them to some extent. It delays their story from being heard to some extent. But the person who's experiencing the marginalization always has the deeper and purer vantage point. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So Peggy McIntosh is a famous sociologist, does a lot of work around racism and privilege. And one of the things that she's most noted for is this idea of a backpack of privilege. And it's things that people simply take for granted when they might be a part of the racial privileged group in a society. So the ability to find a Band-Aid that matches your skin tone. Things that people simply take for granted. Now, one of the activities that many anti-racist facilitators do is this walk of privilege. And if you've ever participated in it, you'll see a group of people line up in a straight line, and they're asked to take a step forward based on whether or not the line that they hear is true to them, right? So I can find a place to live in a community that's safe where most people look like me. They take a step forward, right? People who can't resonate with that, they stay put. And what you will notice is that based on the privileges that you have afforded to you, that you're kind of born with, you move forward. Now, what's fascinating about this is that if you had everyone stop at the very end, you'll notice that the people that are way ahead, they don't have a good sense of how far ahead they are. They don't know. They don't know if the person next to them is 3 steps behind or 30 steps behind. But the people who are disenfranchised, they know exactly how far other people are ahead of them. And they can see that distance, and they see every step forward. And so when we have these moments of people telling their story and that story being devalued, it's a reminder of that moment. It's that moment of, I know what I see. I see 30 steps ahead, and I see where I am right now.
Downtown Southside bus stop, need a ride. Downtown Southside.